Welcome to Boom Shot, the show where we take a look at film photography and the business behind the scenes. I'm your host, Garrett Ray, and today we're talking about why I spent $2,000 on a camera that can't shoot 4K. Why would I do that? Well, it's not as crazy as you might think. Let's talk about it. The Canon C100 is one of my favorite cameras to shoot with, if not actually my favorite. It's an entry-level cinema camera that has basically an all-in-one package, and it puts out a really great image to boot. That being said though, it doesn't shoot in 4K, which nowadays seems like buying an overly priced potato. So why spend $2,000 on the thing, and why choose this as our main camera for MISMANAGED? Today, I'm going to walk you through all the reasons that I felt that this was the right choice for me to buy, for my company, and for the show that we're doing. First, let's take a look at one of the biggest things I look for when I pick up any camera: ease of use. The C100 is covered in buttons, and they are all stupid useful. On the left side here, we've got buttons that allow us to access a magnify function so we can get really good focus by punching in on the image, as well as a button to turn on and off our focus peaking. Down below that, we've got buttons that allow us to turn on our zebras so we can know where our highlights are blowing out, and waveforms so we know exactly what the sensor is seeing. If you're not shooting with waveforms now, you definitely should be. We're probably going to be doing a video on that at some point, but for right now, there are already tutorials out there that you can watch that explain how to use that tool, and every filmmaker needs to know how to read those. On the bottom here, we've got a row of buttons that allow us to access our ISO, shutter speed, and auto iris controls. Now, ISO and shutter speed, you can also access those controls from the handle on the right side of the camera, and that's how I always do it, so I never use these buttons. I never touch the auto iris button. I always set my exposure completely manually, so that's a personal preference, but it's there if you need it in a pinch. Then at the bottom is one of my favorite things ever: built-in ND filters. If you don't know, ND stands for neutral density, and these are basically sunglasses for your camera. I hate screwing on ND filters onto the ends of my lenses, so this allows me to swap through 3 different levels of neutral density filters in the camera no matter what lens I'm using. I don't always have a matte box handy, so it's not like I can just swap out the same ND filter for any lens. I'd have to have a whole bunch more if I wasn't using this camera. And when I'm shooting outdoors with a shallow depth of field, this is a lifesaver. On the back, we've got our flip-out LCD screen and our viewfinder. Now, the LCD screen on this is pretty good, and I like it, but the viewfinder is kind of crap. Most of the time, I only use it for framing my shots. If I want to set my exposure or color temperature, I never trust what the viewfinder says. I only trust the LCD screen. That said, it doesn't really bother me that much because I prefer to use the bigger screen anyway. Up on the top, you've got your menu button that gives you access to your full camera menu and all of your settings. Now, this is a very easy to understand menu, which I appreciate so much because a lot of other camera menus like those from Sony are just convoluted and crazy in ways that they don't need to be. So this makes it a lot easier for me to navigate that on this camera. Also, another thing that I love about this is that the menu is actually transparent, so I can keep an eye on my frame while I'm changing those settings. It doesn't take up the whole thing, and it doesn't make my image go away, which is a silly thing to really want out of a camera and make a decision based on, and that's not why I chose this camera, but I do really enjoy that and appreciate that that's how this works. Below all this stuff, you have your battery slot. Now, the battery life on the C100 is legendary for lasting ridiculously long times. The standard battery that ships with the camera can last 4 to 5 hours when you're shooting. To get the same amount of time out of something like a Red or an A7S, you would normally have to go through 2 or 3 batteries just to get the same amount of time you would get with the one that comes in the box with the C100. This is super important when we're doing 12-hour shoots for MISMANAGED. We don't want to have to worry about swapping and charging batteries all the time, and this just takes a little bit of that stress away from us because we know we're going to be able to keep shooting for a long time. There are 2 SD card slots that allow you to switch from one card to the next while you're recording without ever having to break or losing any data. You've got buttons here in the middle that allow you to control playback of all the stuff that you've shot previously, and those double as customizable buttons for when you're shooting. You can map those to whatever functions you want and have that at your fingertips all the time. On the right side of the camera, we have a removable handle with a joystick on it. You use this joystick to navigate all your menus. And if you click in on it, you can access your ISO, shutter speed, and white balance controls without having to press the buttons on the other side of the camera. This is how I shoot all the time. The top handle is great for carrying the camera around, but more importantly, it has two XLR inputs built into it. These are phantom powered, so I can run a boom mic directly into my camera without having to use an external recorder to get good audio. This is what I do all the time when I'm shooting interviews or for this show. There's also a stereo microphone array built into the handle, and this is great for using it as a scratch audio track when you're going to sync up your audio later with something from an external recorder. A couple times when my audio didn't work out from the recorder, I actually used the audio from the stereo microphones and it ended up sounding pretty good, so it works in a pinch. As an added bonus, you can also take the handle off completely. This is great when you need a smaller package or if you're going to balance it on a gimbal. I love having everything just at my fingertips when I'm shooting. I don't want to go through a whole bunch of menus just to access basic camera functions. This is one of the main reasons I went with a C100 over a GH4 or a Sony A7S. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. If this doesn't shoot 4K, why am I buying it in 2017? Doesn't doing that make me some kind of, I don't know, giant doofus? Maybe, but let me explain why I trust the image quality here. First off, I love the look of a 35mm sensor. Something like the GH4 that has a micro four thirds sensor has just a video-y quality to it, and it's not a look that I'm a big fan of. Second, the C100 actually has a 4K sensor. The image it puts out is a 1920 by 1080 sample of that image. Now, without getting into the science of it, basically what that means is that I get a more detailed image than any other camera shooting with a 1080p sensor. I also get better color information and better low light performance. This was a huge thing to consider for Mismanaged. All of our shoots are going to be overnight on a location that's not really well lit, and since we're shooting this guerrilla style, we're not going to have the time or the money to put up lights everywhere that we want to. So having a camera that can shoot in less than optimal lighting situations is going to be super, super important. Last year, we shot our test footage for Mismanaged on Red cameras, and the image looks amazing. The only problem with that is we needed a lot more light to pull that image out of those cameras. The C100 allows us to go very guerrilla style and shoot in low light and still get a very detailed image that we can be proud of. Now, some people might say, if you need low light performance, why not get an A7S or an A7S II? Those are fantastic cameras, and what Sony has done with them and how low light you can shoot in is practically magic. It's amazing. But that said, when you push those cameras, you get a really bad rolling shutter effect. And for what I shoot a lot of the time, which is a lot of movement and snap zooms for Mismanaged, that rolling shutter effect just gets amplified by every little move. And I don't want my footage looking jello-y. The less rolling shutter I have, the better, and the C100 definitely wins out in this department. Another thing that I use all the time is Canon's Cinema Locked Picture Profile. Basically what this does is flatten out my image while I'm shooting and give me 12 stops of dynamic range, so I get more detail in my shadows and my highlights at the same time. Canon's skin tones when I'm shooting are just so much more natural than any of the other cameras I've worked with. I have to do less work in post to make the image look the right color than I do with other cameras. So between the control we have over the camera without having to dig through menus, the ridiculously long battery life, and the capabilities of the sensor, I'm confident that we're going to get an image that we can be very proud of when we shoot Mismanaged with this in August. Now the C100 isn't for everybody. It's way too big and bulky for vlogging. It definitely doesn't have that slow motion capability that a lot of people like. It only goes up to 60i in frame rate, and it is definitely pricey. I'm just telling you the reasons why I felt this was the right choice for me and my production company and how I shoot. You should definitely do a bunch of research on whatever camera you're going to buy. Find the thing that works best for the way that you shoot and then make your purchase decision based on that. That being said, this is definitely the right choice for me, at least until I step up to the C300, which does shoot true 4K. That thing costs $12,000 though, so that's in the future. We'll let you know as soon as it happens though and give you a very extensive review of it. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Boom Shot. We'll see you next week with more behind the scenes coverage on our production of Mismanaged. Hey guys, thanks for joining us. If you like what we're doing, make sure you subscribe, give us a like down below so we can keep doing this. Here on this channel, you can find Boom Shot, excerpts from our podcast, Roll Sound, which is on iTunes and SoundCloud, and short films, music videos, fun stuff. What are you doing? Hit the like button. There you go.